A young woman and a child walking down a street. What is suspicious about that? And yet that CCTV footage that you've been watching, it tells of an altogether sinister story and plot. Tori Stafford was a bright-spirited 8-year-old girl with a huge personality. She had a heart of gold. She was somebody who was literally full of life. On what should have been just a completely ordinary spring day, she sets off from school. But tragically, Tori's never going to make it home. Because what followed is a series of, the only way I can describe it, horrifying events that no parent and certainly no child should ever endure. When they do the checks on that CCTV, they realise that Tori, who is this unsuspecting and trusting child, is being led away by a woman that she'd never met, a woman she didn't know. And that's the last time she's ever seen alive. This heartbreaking case is absolutely brutal in nature, and it reminds us of the unspeakable dangers that exist in our world, because this is the savage murder of Tori Stafford, a little girl who should have had the rest of her life ahead of her. To those of you who are new to my channel, I release my content here twice weekly. If you like crime and consistency, I am the channel for you. I'm going to bring back the words crime and consistency occasionally because somebody's got in contact with me and said they miss it. But I do. I release my content here twice weekly. I shall do for the rest of my natural life, which hopefully will be very long, and I'll grow very old being the grandma of crime. Also, if you like my content and you want a lot more of it, you can get it behind my YouTube membership and Patreon. And with respect, if you are going to do that, if you're going to join, make sure you go through your web browser as opposed to Apple iPhones, for example, because if you go through your Apple technology, you will get charged extra. So just if you do want to become one of my private members and see all the extra content, including podcasts, do it that way. Just a little bit of a life hack for you. And if you do like my content and find it interesting, please do give me a like. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, but you keep coming back to my channel or you find this content interesting, please do subscribe. I would massively appreciate it. And also get notifications on because you'll get reminded when I release my content. Let's talk about Victoria Stafford, who is known as Tori. She was born on July the 15th, 2000. Her mum was Tara McDonald and her father was Rodney Stafford. She had an older brother called Darren. She had a really close relationship with Darren. Now, when Tori was a young child, around the ages of 2 to 3 years of age, her parents separated. She was described by people who knew her as this happy-go-lucky, bubbly, really inquisitive and enthusiastic little girl. She apparently had two sides to her. So she was this really spunky and feisty tomboy. She loved jumping in muddy puddles, but she also had a super girly side. So she liked lip gloss and shopping. She also went to church in her dress with her grandmother every Sunday. So she came across super girly on a Sunday with her grandma. She attended Oliver Stevens School in Woodstock, Ontario. Now in 2009, Tori is 8 years of age. She had her 14-year-old brother Darren at this point and her mum, who were living with her grandmother. So essentially this is a very close-knit family. Her mum had recently bought a new house, which was really close to her school. It was only a short walk away. So clearly there has been some destabilisation because of the breakup of her mother and father, but then they've had that stability of living with grandma and they're this close family unit, but they're onwards and upwards because mum has got this house that they're going to be moving into. On April the 8th, 2009, she's dropped off at school by her grandma along with her brother. After school, Tori actually had plans to go to her mum's new house for the first time. And later that evening, there was a plan for some of her friends to come round to watch a musical with her. So it was going to be this absolutely picture perfect evening, all about new possibilities and celebration. Now at 3:25 p.m, it's the end of the school day. Though Tori leaves, she ends up going back to the classroom to pick up her mum's butterfly earrings that she'd borrowed, and she'd basically left them behind and she wanted to make sure that she got them back. So due to this, when she leaves the school, she's all alone, and that is going to prove fatal for this beautiful little girl. Now, her brother Darren, he would normally have walked her home, but he'd ended up walking some younger children back who lived nearby first. So when he comes back for Tori, he can see that she's nowhere to be found. So he then goes to his mum's house and his mum says, look, Tori hasn't come back. She's never arrived. Now, immediately, like this responsible young man that he's clearly growing into, he goes straight back to look for his sister on his bike. And His mum goes out to look for Tori on foot because obviously this is completely unlike her, and they're immediately worried. At 5:20, Tara phones her mother, this is Tori's grandmother, and immediately they both begin searching for her in the car because now they're really worried. They're really feeling that sense of dread in the pits of their stomach because where is she? They end up reporting her missing at just after 6 p.m. that evening, and you can understand why there's that delay because they're going to be hoping above hope that maybe she's met some friends and she's playing, maybe she's got distracted. You're not going to be thinking to yourself the worst case scenario because if you allow yourself to think that way, you are not going to be any use to anybody. Now, they get to the following day. So now they really are in a scenario where they think something terrible has happened to this child because when she's been missing for this period of time, it speaks of something altogether malevolent potentially playing out. You're going to think to yourself, there's no way she'll have wandered off and got lost. This is an environment she's used to. Maybe she's had an accident. That could be your best case scenario thoughts. But the one that's going to be underpinning the worst case scenario is somebody has abducted your child. Now, the following day, like I said, so this is April the 9th, College Avenue Secondary School, this is nearby school, it provides police with their CCTV footage. Now, utterly chillingly, Tori can actually be seen in the video and she's walking with an unknown woman who had dark hair. I imagine for the moment that they see it's a woman, there's some kind of hope because you're thinking to yourself, okay, maybe this woman has got some mental health issues, maybe this woman wants a child and they've taken the child to do no harm because it's a woman. We have these biases and myths towards females. On the whole, they aren't actually myths if I'm being fair. It's pretty real that you can go to a woman who's a stranger and feel safe because we are nurturing, we are compassionate, we are empathic. And that's the bias that you're going to create in your mind because you're going to think, oh, it's a female. Maybe Tori's okay. Now, the family don't know who she is. She's a perfect stranger. So understandably, they are very scared because what is she doing with this female? At this point, the footage is broadcast to the public because obviously they have that hope that someone can identify who she is. And almost immediately, the community come good. The police start receiving tips. And numerous people believe the woman is going to be 18-year-old Terry Lynn McClintic. Now, when I've looked for the background on McClintic, I actually have only been able to find one source, so I'm going to take it from that source. It says that McClintic was born to a stripper in Woodstock in 1990. At birth, her mother actually hands her over to Carol McClintic, her best friend. She's also a fellow stripper. And Carol basically becomes her mum. In the next few years, the two live all over Ontario. They're moving every couple of years. They live in Guelph, Hamilton, North Bay, Parry Sound, and Muskoka. So basically, there's a lot of unsettling experiences there in the fact that they're not putting down roots, they're constantly moving around. Also, it turns out she's molested when she's around 4 years of age, and that's obviously going to be a deeply traumatic experience. Add to that the destabilization just of where they live, and that's going to be a cooking pot for lots of concerns going down the line. Now, the moves mean that McClintic attends lots of different schools, so again, not a lot of people looking at her and seeing how she's changing or things that might be happening to her because there's an inconsistency where the authorities are concerned. You've not got teachers literally invested in her care because she moves so often. And the school attendance apparently was a problem. At school, she said that she was bullied because she was a stripper's daughter. I imagine that would be the case. Children can be a little bit cruel around those things. Now, when she gets to 7 years of age, when she's living in Guelph, Children's Aid actually began what became a long-running interest in her life because obviously there were concerns about who she was, what was happening to her, and whether she was safe. Now, it's not clear where McClintic was when she started doing drugs, but apparently it's around the age of 8, which is terrifying. Bear in mind as well, there's a parallel there because that's the age that Tori is when she's abducted and murdered. Now, McClintic apparently started with weed and then she slowly graduated to harder drugs. And it's horrific to imagine that a child of 8 has access to any of these drugs. So from then until around 18, she's a serious drug user. And she spent her childhood at 2 foster homes and her teenage years in detention homes. And from the age of 12 to 17, she'd been in and out for numerous misdemeanors, such as fighting. She was also convicted of assault at least 6 times, so she's violent. Let's be real. When you're a young person, to be convicted of these kind of offences at least 6 times speaks to something within you that is deeply fractured. Now, sometime in 2008, the mother and daughter, I say mother and daughter, but the mother and daughter who is not really her daughter, hasn't really been through the process of being adopted, but nonetheless, they move into a dilapidated 2-bedroom house in Woodstock. And McClintock didn't apparently have any friends, but she did become very well known to drug dealers in the town. So in early 2009, so in the months leading up to Tori's abduction and murder, McClintock is taking antidepressants, she's popping OxyContin, and she's also taking ecstasy pills regularly, and she's injecting morphine and also smoking weed. So a cooking pot of possibility where problems are concerned. Add to that the violent nature that is within her, add to that the destabilization of her experience and the abuse that she's suffered, and we do have a potential here where a young woman who should have, to all intents and purposes, had a far better life has had such a fractured one that she is genuinely a ticking time bomb. Now, on April the 12th, McClintock is brought in for questioning because people have called in the fact they think it's her. She also has an arrest warrant that's outstanding at that point for a minor offence, so it's easy for them to bring her in. Now, when she was interviewed, she actually says, "Oh, that's not me. That's not me in the video. All these people who rang in and said, you know what, that's McClintock, they're wrong. I just look kind of like her, but it's not actually me." Now, bear in mind, she was able to be held because of that previous arrest warrant for the minor offence. Now, by April the 15th, nearly 1,000 tips have been received regarding Tori. So the community are rallying. They want to bring this child home. They want to know where she is and figure out what's happened. So OCPS, which is Oxford Community Police Office, they asked for the Ontario Provincial Police to assist them with the investigation because they didn't have the staff. It exceeded their capacity and they want to know what's happened to Tori. Obviously, at this point, everyone is deeply concerned that something terrible could have happened to this child and is more likely to have happened to this child because of the gap between when she's been last seen and the fact that she hasn't been found, and also the fact that this woman is in custody who's denying that she's had anything to do with her abduction, even though people have literally said that is the person you have in custody. Now, in the initial stages of the investigation, Tori's own mother, Tara, who is a lovely parent, she's considered as a suspect, which must have been absolutely devastating for her. Bear in mind, she did have dark hair like the woman pictured in the surveillance footage. She had also waited 2 hours before raising the alarm that Tori had not returned home, and they alleged that she hadn't started looking for her daughter until 4:30 p.m. But I think we can just put that down to the belief that everything was going to be all right. She was moving into a new place. She thought her son was going to be bringing her daughter home. They did act when she realised that she hadn't come home. And also, yes, the woman in that video has dark hair, but as we know, her own son came home and told her mother that he didn't know where her sister was, and that's when they actually started to search. So it doesn't make sense that she was a suspect, but essentially she was. Also, some of the tips that had pointed the police to McClintock had said that she was an associate of Tori's mother. So both she and her partner, James Gorris, who is Tori's stepfather, were addicted to drugs at the time of the disappearance. So therefore, they put them in the same category. It was even suggested that Gorris had a drug debt which had links to the missing little girl. So this is a cooking pot of possibility with the police where they think, oh, well, maybe it is the mother or the father in this case who has actually caused harm to this child. And I'll give the respect that's due to the police. When it comes down to these kind of cases and children go missing, it tends to be a family member who's been involved. So they're going along that stereotypical path, but it's just not true. Now we get to May the 12th. At this point, McClintock is interviewed again. Now this time, she tells the investigators that on the 8th of April, she'd first gone to the employment centre before going to pick up OxyContins. She said that she did not stop near the College Avenue Secondary School. That's where the CCTV footage was captured. But she said she did walk on Fife Avenue, which was across from the high school. And she also admitted to having used illegal drugs that day. On May the 19th, investigators then take McClintock from the detention centre where she was being held to OCPS headquarters to provide a statement regarding Tori Stafford. Now, in order to do this, they had to obtain an order from the Superior Court of Justice. She also took part in a polygraph test and then was interviewed about her involvement in the abduction. Now, after the polygraph had taken place, she ends up confessing that it was her in the CCTV footage walking with Tori. And the reason she'll have done that is because she will have failed the polygraph test, and she'll ultimately be aware that she's failed the polygraph test, and she'll want to mitigate how bad that looks for her. So at 4:47 p.m, she's then arrested for the abduction of a child under 14. Then she's asked further questions. At this point, she tells investigators that her 28-year-old boyfriend, Michael Rafferty, had sexually assaulted Tori, kicked her, then put rubbish bags over her before repeatedly hitting her in the head with a hammer.
Where's the hammer?
Where did he hit her with the hammer?
And I see the garbage bag over, so there wasn't afterwards. Like, just pretty much what made it easiest. Like, he knew what he was doing. Like, there was no like blood splatter. Like,
can you imagine being an investigator and listening to that horror playing out in real time? This beautiful 8-year-old child has been stolen from the streets, brutalized after being molested. You cannot even begin to envisage how that would feel as the information lands with those officers. I know detectives hear a lot of brutal stories, but these kind of brutalities are rare. She also says that they'd then hidden Tori's beautiful, incalculably important body and being under a pile of rocks. Now, following that conversation at 5:15 p.m, she's then advised that she's being arrested for the offence of accessory to murder, because clearly she's blaming somebody else for carrying out the killing. Now, at this point, she states that she's absolutely willing to cooperate. She actually refused the offer of speaking to a lawyer on multiple occasions. She's just saying, no, I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to tell the truth. And this is really appealing to investigators. But also, I suppose you're trying as a suspect to make it clear that you have no desire to lie, because you want to be seen as a decent human being, even when you've carried out something so unbelievably indecent, such as abducting a child and delivering them to an apparent predator. Now, at this point, she also drew a map to show where Tori's body had been dumped. So she's just trying to let them know, I am completely on your side now. I am not going to lie. I'm going to tell the absolute truth. Now, after her arrest, she actually accompanied investigators to the Guelph area, basically to try to assist in finding the body of Tori. At this point, they obtain authorization to keep McClintock in their custody so that she can indeed help them to try to locate Tori's remains. Now, on the way to the Guelph, she described a house which was close to where Tori had been killed. She also pointed out a Home Depot on Woodlawn Road where she bought rubbish bags, and they actually later obtained CCTV from that shop which shows McClintock buying rubbish bags. This is at 5:12 p.m. on the April the 8th. Now, McClintock ends up taking part in many hours of interviews over the course of the investigation, in which she eventually detailed her movements on the day she actually kidnapped Tori. So she tells them she'd gone to the College Avenue church for some food vouchers, then the Foodland grocery shop. This is verified by CCTV. She then went back to the church with her receipts, because that's the policy of the church. She then goes to the Community Employment Centre at 2:19 p.m. and she sends in her resume. She then tried to use the computer there for MSN, but she couldn't remember her password to sign in. Then she goes home at 2:30 p.m. After this, she went to the school and she told officers that the first lone child she saw coming towards her was Tori. That was the sliding doors moment for Tori, that she was just by herself and McClintock strikes. This is when she starts talking to Tori. She apparently introduced herself as T, and Tori said that her name was Victoria, but everybody called her Tori. They then end up engaging in conversations about dogs. So Tori had a Shih Tzu, and McClintock told her that she also had a Shih Tzu called Precious, and asks that beautiful little girl if she would like to see the dog. Tori very sadly agrees to go and see that dog. An 8-year-old, thinking that she can trust this female. Why wouldn't she? This girl who's so nice is chatting away to her, telling her that she's got a dog too. Why wouldn't she go? Children are so vulnerable to that kind of situation, because why would you not trust this girl? You've not grown up in a world where you think women are unsafe. You love your dog, you'd love to meet her dog, and that seals her fate. The CCTV shows the pair walking together at 3:32 p.m. McClintock then literally escorts Tori out shot of the camera to the Crescent Care Retirement Home car park, and according to her, when they reach that car park, Rafferty is waiting. She apparently pushes her into the car. Tori lies on the back seat floor of the car, and McClintock drapes a coat over her. Then she's driven to a remote area which was north of Guelph. Tori is then ultimately raped, murdered, and her body is hidden. McClintock tells the detectives that Tori pleaded with her for help and said, "T, make him stop," as Rafferty was sexually assaulting her. She said she saw Rafferty kick Tori more than once before using a hammer to murder her. It's a horrific series of events, not just to describe, but for those detectives to hear. Can't even begin to imagine when that is translated to the family, how they would feel in that moment. The worst case scenario times by a billion. On May the 20th, McClintock's charged with first-degree murder. She signed a consent form which stated that she would accompany police for the next 2 days to try to locate poor Tori's body. She gave a further description of the house near where Tori had been murdered, specifically saying that it was at an angle to the road and that it had a dirt track opposite it. An OPP helicopter goes ahead, looks for that house from above. That search continued the following day. McClintock said that on April the 8th, everything had been covered in snow. She was struggling to recognise it now because the ground was green and looked different. So that was why she couldn't be absolutely distinct about which house it was. Now it's July the 19th, 2009, when an OPP officer notices a house in the Mount Forest area that he thinks looks like the artist's sketch, which had been drawn of the house described by McClintock. He's very astute. So this house was on concession 6, and the area across from the house also matched the description provided by McClintock. Now, as he drives down the lane, what does he notice? A large pile of rocks. So being a diligent individual, he gets out of his vehicle, he goes and investigates, and what hits him instantly? The scent of decomposition. As he gets closer to the pile of rocks, he notices a green bin bag under some of the rocks, which lay beneath a pine tree. In that bag were the significantly decomposed remains of Tori. It had been over 3 months since she'd gone missing. They were only able to confirm that it was indeed Tori through dental records. Don't get me wrong, in that bag, they discovered those butterfly earrings she'd gone back for that day. They also found parts of a headband and a Hannah Montana shirt which she'd been wearing. She was naked from the waist down. Her cause of death was multiple blunt force impact to the head. The blows had been made by a claw hammer. An 8-year-old child destroyed this way. It's just incomprehensible for me to imagine the kind of human being that can take a claw hammer to a child's head. A claw hammer. She had broken ribs, internal bleeding, lacerations to her liver. She was decimated. Now, even though her body was in such a state of decomposition, they couldn't find any forensic evidence linking any bodily fluids to Rafferty. What they did find in Rafferty's car was a computer. And guess what was on that computer? He'd made searches for underage rape, real underage rape pictures, and nude preteen. Honestly, what I would like to happen to these kind of predators is not legal itself. Sorry, there are just moments where I think about the monsters walking the streets and it's devastating. Our children at risk from these predators, and Tori met this predator and look what he did to her. Now, bear in mind, they also have that first person testimony as a witness where McClintock is concerned because she's saying that he raped that beautiful child. Now, on April the 30th, 2010, McClintock pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Tori, and she was duly and rightfully sentenced to life in prison. And she made a statement in court about Tori, which bothers me. I'm going to say it to you so you hear, because I find it twisted and ironic with respect. She read this out. On April the 8th, I don't know what I thought was going to happen. I am honoured to have been able to spend even a brief amount of time with such an amazing person, and it pains me to think about how many people won't get to see what a beautiful and brilliant woman I just know she would have grown up to be. Sorry guys, is it just me who thinks, what are you saying? You were involved in the destruction of this child, and it's going to get worse, by the way, guys, as you stay with this case. It's going to get worse. But what are you saying when you're talking about this beautiful and brilliant woman this child would have become had you not been the reason she's dead? What right have you got to say that? She went on to say, every night before I go to sleep, I tell myself that when I wake up in the morning, this will all have been just a very, very bad dream. But when I open my eyes, I look around me and see that this is reality. Oh, sorry, are we meant to feel sorry for you? Are we meant to feel bad that there's some collateral damage from your crime, being that you're in prison, for example, and you've realised it's inescapable, you're going to be there for the rest of your days? Because that's what you're saying. You're saying, oh, when I wake up, I realised, yeah, I did do this, and I'm paying the consequences. She goes on to say, I can tell you that rather than acting, I over-evaluated the situation, and rather than think about any of it, I resorted to more drugs. I chose to tell myself until I believed in that everything would be okay. So that makes no sense whatsoever. I know what she's saying. She just blindly carried on with the drug use, and she uses that to describe why she just carried on doing something that was so terrible. She was thinking about a next hit, not actually about the reality of her actions. But that makes no sense. Being a drug dependent doesn't mean you get involved in child rape and murder. That's just a lie. She goes on to say, I didn't wake up on that morning thinking I was going to take a child. Not in a million years would I have pictured myself standing here, but here I am. And I know that I need to stand up and take responsibility for my actions. You were on CCTV, sweetheart. You were going to get caught. Let's be clear. They were always going to be able to get this crime pinned on you because you're seen doing it. She went on, every day I think that maybe if I hadn't walked down that street that day, that precious little angel would still be here. No, she wouldn't. You'd have picked another kid. So you're right to some degree. On a literal level, if you'd walked down a different street, a different kid would have died. But you walked down that street and Tori was your victim. But let's not play with the idea you weren't looking for a victim and you weren't delivering that victim to the predator that you took her to. She said, every day I asked myself, why? Why did I tell myself that everything would be okay? Just why? I can't explain my thought process on that day. I can't do anything except be honest. I will never try to make excuses for my judgment calls and my actions. Yes, I was under the influence of drugs, and yes, there are things that I've experienced in the past that may have affected my reactions to the situation I was in, but regardless of those reasons, it doesn't make what happened acceptable. Hey, sweetheart, nothing would make what happened to Tori acceptable. Even if you had been born to monsters and you had been molested every second of every day, beaten black and blue constantly, that would still never have been reason to destroy a child. In fact, in truth, it would be a reason to do the opposite, because you know what? You've been there and it didn't feel good. Again, bringing in this idea that she's had it hard, but you know, that shouldn't give her any excuses. And yet, I'm going to say it so that you don't necessarily see me as the monster I am. She said, every time I close my eyes, I'm flooded with the memories of that day. Good, I hope it haunts you every second, every moment of the rest of your life. I hope you are literally imprisoned by the ideas and memories of what you did. She said, I will never forget what happened, the mistakes I made, the failure I was. 1,000,000 tears will never be enough, and 1,000,000 words would never be able to express how truly sorry I am. I allowed my own issues, my own past, to affect the future of an innocent girl. I'll never be able to take back what's happened, but I've been trying to do everything I can to make things as right as they can be, which is why I stand here today. Do you want a round of applause? Do you want a certificate? Do you want a badge? What do you want? You think that people are watching you going, oh, you're not as bad as we believe you are. They know you are as bad. They know you are evil. Your actions speak to that. She said, I would give anything to be able to trade places with that amazing little girl. You know what, sweetheart? We will allow you to do that. Yeah, if that was a possibility, we would 100% agree to that reality. She said, but I can't, and man, that hurts. Well, not as much. as what happened to Tori. Not as much as what happened to Tori's family. Your hurt doesn't even come close. She said, Tori will never leave my heart. You have no right to hold her in your heart. You have no right. Tori is not in your heart. She's nowhere near you. She's in bliss. She's safe now. You'll never know that because you're not going to go to that same place. They went on to say, she'll hold my heart in her hands until the day I die. Well, if Tori has your heart in her hands, get ready for it to be crushed. Get ready for it to be destroyed. She said, she's made me realize that I need to deal with my issues. Oh, well, that's great. Wow, brilliant. That's amazing. So it's really great that this had a positive consequence. I mean, every cloud has a silver lining. Child murder and molestation has led to you going, oh, you know what? I really need to deal with my psychological issues and concerns. Whatever. She said, I've realized I can't continue on the road I've been walking. You're in prison. You're not going to be walking any roads. The idea that you've got sobriety now because you can't get hold of the stuff that you'd be on outside, that's irrelevant. And the likelihood is she probably will carry on taking drugs because prisons are full of them. She said, I owe my life to that precious little angel and all the people who've been hurt because of this. Enough people have been hurt as a result of this, and I refuse to drag anyone through the proceedings of a trial. Spending the next few decades of life in prison is nothing compared to what Tori was robbed of. I know that my apology doesn't mean much compared to what was lost, and I'm not asking for forgiveness as I stand here, but I'm trying to make amends the best way I can by giving you my life today. I don't think you're giving your life to anyone. You stood in court with your life. You're going to go to prison. You're going to eat food 3 times a day, do activities, do some education. You're not going to have your freedom, but you're going to have your breath. You're going to be able to breathe the air, have conversations, grow old. You're going to do everything you denied that little girl. So no one's sitting there believing the BS that's coming out of your mouth. Rodney Stafford, Tori's father, he gave a victim impact statement. He just spoke about all the things his innocent little girl was going to miss out on. Now, it's a really long victim impact statement. I'm going to just give you a taste of it, the parts that really stood out for me. All of it stood out, but these in particular. He said, Victoria may be gone in body, but Victoria's legacy will live on in every person out there that has heard Victoria's story or that will hear Victoria's story. I miss Victoria every day, and I cry for Victoria daily, but I know Victoria's innocence will prevail. The loss of Victoria has left an emptiness inside everyone that no parent should have to feel. No matter the sentence set down for this heinous crime, nothing will ever be close to satisfying the feeling of the loss of your child. You cannot prepare for it. You can only do your part to seek justice for what has happened and make others aware that predators are in fact out there, not just here, but everywhere. The hardest part of my last year has been watching my 12-year-old son try to continue through life, trying to figure out why the pod now only has 1p. Who split the pod and why? Best friends torn apart, a brother and sister relationship that you only see in the movies. Darren has suffered daily for the last year. You can see it. He tries well to hide it, but you can see the emptiness. He misses his sister. He feels guilty every day because he never walked her home. It kills me inside to see him cry. Terry Lynn, over the course of the last year, I have been forced to have feelings of hurt, anger, and worst of all, hate towards you. All feelings I've never felt towards someone before. As hard as this is for me, I do have to say thank you to you. Thank you for stepping up and accepting responsibility for your actions resulting in Victoria's eventual death. I thank you for aiding in the search of Victoria's remains and for all the information provided to help lead up to finding Victoria. It's been said that without you, we may never have found Victoria. With your aid, we were able to properly lay Victoria to rest. I now believe in my heart that you were just a woman under the influence of a controlled substance who took things too far. Victoria is and has always been a very huge part of my life, but now she is gone, with only an empty void filled with joyous memories of a precious little girl, a totally innocent child with a heart of gold taken far too soon. I hope that during your sentence, you find peace with yourself and with God. And just maybe one day, I could learn to forgive you. But for now, excuse me if I don't. My little girl is gone. That man has got more grace than I have in this lifetime and any lifetime I have inhabited or will inhabit if that happens. He's got more compassion in his fingertip than I have in my entire being, because I could not do that. I could not say that. I would have only hate, vitriol, a desire for retaliation. That's how I would feel. After the sentencing, there was a temporary publication ban ordered. Basically, they didn't want anybody to broadcast certain information relating to the murder because it was argued that without a ban, there was substantial risk to Rafferty's right to a fair trial, and that's fair enough. You know, people need to be given due process. They said that the opinion of Rafferty could have been biased by the pre-trial publicity, and the jury could have been prejudiced against him due to this. So the information was not allowed to be published, included anything that had mentioned in court about Rafferty. But the information about McClintock, that was public domain. So they were able to say that she'd pled guilty, that she'd been convicted, and also that she'd been sentenced to life in prison. And that had to remain in place until Rafferty's trial had taken place and also his verdict had been decided. And that's fair enough. Now, in March 2012, Rafferty's trial began. Guess what? He pled not guilty to first-degree murder, sexual assault, causing bodily harm, and kidnapping. Now, his defence argued that McClintock was a prolific liar. She was. It's absolutely true. They also argued McClintock was actually responsible for the murder. Now, the forensic experts, they did testify, however, that a blood sample found in Rafferty's car was almost certainly from Tori. And then there was DNA in a gym bag in the car, which was also from Tori. They also found a mixture of blood and semen on the back of the front passenger seat. And his phone records also showed that he was in Woodstock, Guelph and Mount Forest on the day of the disappearance at the times which matched up with the timeline McClintock had provided. So clearly, he had sexually assaulted that beautiful little girl. Rafferty had also been on apparent numerous dates after the murder, because why have any conscience about the demise of a child? In fact, he'd been out on dates with 7 different women. One woman who he dated, a woman called Sarah Hodge, she said that Rafferty said he had inside information about drug use by Tori's mum. She also said that he was constantly checking media reports about the case, was really interested in what's playing out, and also spoke about how abducted children can grow up believing that the abductors are actually their parents. I mean, bizarre conversations. I get it. We're into true crime. We appreciate these conversations, but not when you line it up with all the other information that he's interested in. Now, another woman that he dated, a woman called Jennifer Millock, she said that he told her that he had a friend called Terry who was in juvenile detention and that the police were treating him as guilty by association. Really? I think you'll find out that they were treating you guilty because you were guilty. Now, of course, the prosecution have got their star witness, haven't they? McClintock herself. Now, during her testimony, she says that Rafferty had pushed her to kidnap a girl for him. I mean, if you're not in the process of just doing whatever the bidding of the guy that you're hanging out with would say you do, I don't know what you're doing with your time. I mean, if you're in that situation where the guy you're with is like, you know what I want you to do? What do you want me to do? I want you to go out and I want you to kidnap a child. I don't know whether I really want to do that. No, I want you to do that. Go out and kidnap a child. I don't really feel like I'm going to do that. Well, I'm saying go and kidnap a child. I'm just not going to do it. Oh, okay. I'd really like you to. No, I'm still not going to do it. You know, that's how a conversation would go before you call the police and say this weirdo wants me to kidnap a child for him. It doesn't go like, you know what I want you to do today? No, what do you want me to do? Kidnap a child. Okay, I'll go and kidnap a child for you. I mean, what does that say about the kind of individual that she is, that she'd be willing to do that? And she said off she went. She kidnapped beautiful little Tori. And then Rafferty, after he is presented with Tori, rapes this beautiful little girl. But, and this is really shocking, guys, In contrast to what she previously stated, in contrast to that statement that she made in court where she said, yeah, I'm a co-conspirator of the highest level. Yes, I am guilty of being party to this child's demise. What she actually says now on that stand is that after the sexual assault, McClintock was the one who snapped. She was the one who killed Tori. It's just breathtaking, isn't it? She gave that monologue telling us about how terrible it was, how she regrets it, how she feels so bad that she presented this sexual predator with this child, and turns the story into this feel sorry for me scenario. But she murdered that little girl. She said, it's taken me this long to come to terms, to accept that I was capable of doing something like this. But now I have come to terms with that. And I'm sitting here today telling the truth, and it doesn't get any more real than that. Isn't that staggering? Now, McClintock's violent past was also brought to light by Rafferty's defence. So when asked if she'd beaten up her own mother in the past, she said, yeah, I did assault my own mother on 2 occasions. Apparently she'd choked her, she'd punched her, she'd given her a black eye, she'd caused her to have partial vision loss. She'd also been in prison after she'd attempted to rob 2 men in 2007, and this robbery resulted in her stabbing one of the men. Also, she was punching a police officer when emergency services arrived, so she doesn't accept boundaries. Also, she wouldn't even drop the knife, despite the fact that the police were armed with guns. What a shame that something else hadn't played out there, because then maybe Tori would be alive. But anyway, maybe because she was a female, they didn't shoot her, so she got to live another day, shall we say. And while she was in prison, she even went ahead and, what can I say, wrote a number of disturbing letters. I'm going to read you some of the excerpts of these letters because they are absolutely terrifying. I am fed up with this place. I want to scrap. I just want to bounce and go on a killing spree. I just want to be on a road and take the first person I see, grab them, bring them with me, fucking mutilate the shit out of them, smash their skull, then piece it together like a puzzle. That way, they stay conscious of the pain I'm inflicting on them. I mean, she seems like such a reasonable human being, isn't she? Such a nice, reflective individual who takes responsibility and accountability for the agony that she causes people. I mean, who wouldn't want this woman to just be somebody that everybody forgives? Oh, drives me to the brink. Apparently, she had in the past had lots of problems with rage. I think we've evidenced that very clearly, haven't we? Also, the prosecution brought in the fact that she'd been involved with many assault charges, most of which had involved inmates of youth detention facilities, because like I said, between 12 and 17, she was constantly in them. And it gets worse, guys, because on top of everything that I've just told you, which is obviously abhorrent in nature, she had apparently microwaved a dog. I did say that. I said she microwaved a dog when she was a child. That dog had to be put down as a result. I don't even want to imagine the pain it went through. A sentient being microwaved. Also, she had diaries where she was writing about murder fantasies. But apparently she's so desperate for us to understand that really she isn't a bad person. She is just the biggest liar in the world, isn't she? 26 days after Tori's murder, she actually wrote, I'm getting bloodthirsty again. It's like relapsing on a habit. So she is absolutely resolute and enjoying this kind of behaviour. But like I said, she stood in court in front of Tori's family, basically saying that she'd fallen on a sword and she'd realised what a terrible person she was. No, she hasn't. She's horrible. When she was questioned in court, McClintock said, I'm not denying that I have a history of violence, but I'm not violent towards children, and I've never hurt a child in my life. To try to fathom and comprehend the fact that a child lost their life by my hands is something I could not comprehend. Sorry, you wrote in your diary 26 days later that you were getting bloodthirsty again, you absolute freak. You absolute bastard of nature. You absolute inhumane example of everything broken and dark and wrong in this world. Darren, Tori's brother, actually wrote a statement which was read out in court. It read, not one person can say they feel the same way as me. My sister was the only person I had to talk to. Someone that felt what I felt, cried when I cried, laughed when I laughed. And now I feel alone. Like the world is playing a sick trick on me, but it's not. This is my reality. No more fun times. Just old memories. No more I love yous. Just an empty spot in my heart. He went on to say that his sister was the most important person in the world to him. The words of that 14-year-old boy brought people in that courtroom to tears, and rightfully so. Tara, Tori's mother, she said that she missed her daughter so much that many times, if I didn't have a son, I probably would have taken my own life, because the agony of not having her here with me is so great. I completely understand that. I think so many of us relate to that. It's one of those terrifying ideas to have to cope with the loss of a child and then to continue for those around you when all you want to do is be with them. When Rafferty was given a chance to address the court, he said, "I firmly stand behind not guilty." So he maintained throughout that though he had a role in Tori's disappearance, he was not guilty of murder, kidnapping, or sexual assault. I don't believe that for 1 second. He definitely raped her, without a shadow of a doubt. On May the 11th, 2012, Rafferty was indeed found guilty on all charges. Days later, he was sentenced to life in prison. He'll actually be eligible for parole after 25 years. Judge Thomas Heaney said, "Most tragically of all, you have snuffed out the life of a beautiful, talented, vivacious little girl, a tomboy diva in the trustful innocence of childhood. And for what? So that you could gratify your twisted and deviant desire to have sex with a child? Only a monster could commit such an act of pure evil. You, sir, are a monster." At the end of July that year, Rafferty appealed his conviction. He said the judge's instructions to the jury were flawed. Now, initially, that was rejected as the deadline to appeal had actually passed. However, they then applied for an extension because it was claimed that Rafferty had been unable to use a phone to contact legal counsel. Now, interestingly also, one of the jurors in this case, now this is an unnamed 57-year-old woman, said she had developed post-traumatic stress disorder after serving as a juror in the Rafferty trial. She actually asked to be compensated as a victim of a crime. She said that she'd had to go on long-term disability as a result, and it was actually agreed that she would be given some financial assistance towards the expenses of receiving treatment. Ontario Attorney General Yassir Naqvi announced by January 2017 that anyone who required counselling after being on jury's duty will actually be able to receive it for free later on. I do think that's really important because jurors are obviously subject to the most harrowing content at times, and not everyone's able to cope with that kind of graphic detail. Now, in September 2012, McClintock was sentenced to another 6 months in prison because she'd assaulted another inmate earlier in the year in January. Bear in mind, she'd initially planned to argue against the charge, but officers found a letter that she'd written to another inmate, literally talking about the attack. In the letter she wrote, "It is what it is. Point made. Statement. Just not as loud as I would have liked it to be if you catch what I'm putting down. So if I'm fucking choked, I don't even think I did that much fucking damage." Later in the letter, she said, "I would have preferred a bigger room, then I could have done some real damage." I mean, that's just harrowing, isn't it? Also, just to let you know, the attack began in a peer-to-peer support meeting. I mean, if I'm not in peer-to-peer support meetings where it's all about compassion and understanding and telling your story and getting the support you require, and somebody isn't just coming and randomly attacking other people in it, I don't know what's happening in those meetings. But it shows you how dangerous McClintock is. She basically attacked the inmate, she punched her in the head, she kicked her. She even carried on with the beating, even though her victim was cowering in the fetal position. She didn't even fight back. Now, she did plead guilty because she had to. She gave absolutely no reason for the attack. And this led Justice Colin Westman to say, "My only hope for you is that you will try the best you can to have a more civil attitude to fellow human beings. Violence is not the answer." In 2018, though, Tori's family were informed that McClintock had been moved from a medium security prison to a healing lodge. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So these lodges, by the way, they provide inmates with a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, living area. Also, they design programs for the inmates using Indigenous values and beliefs and the concepts of justice and reconciliation. Oh, it sounds lovely. Understandably, the family are horrified. It meant McClintock's life was going to become nice due to the transfer. Now, Tori's father, Rodney, He actually planned a rally in protest of this decision, and there was absolute and understandable public outrage. So this means that McClintock was returned back to prison after a couple of months. Ha 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 ha! I'm glad. She'll have experienced a nice environment, and then she'll have been back in the clanger where she deserves to be. Now, Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer actually credited opposition and public pressure for the transfer, saying, "Justice has finally been served because of you, the thousands of Canadians who let their voices be heard." He also went on to say, because of the opposition pressure, the Liberals have finally backed down and taken action. And changes to the way inmates are now being transferred to the lodges have been put in place. So prisoners will not be eligible for transferring to those healing lodges without secure perimeters until they're in preparation for release phases of their sentences. I don't think this woman should ever get out anyway. I think she should serve the rest of her natural life in prison. They went on to say that inmates' behaviour and how close they are to being eligible for unescorted temporary absences from prison will now be considered. So basically, it makes it hard for inmates serving long sentences to be transferred. I would say there's a pretty big oversight that wasn't in place to begin with. You know, these serious criminals that could just be wandering off. I mean, surely someone should have some parameters around that. Now, in December 2018, Tori's family learned that Rafferty had been transferred from maximum security to a medium security prison earlier in the year. Now, in a letter to the Public Safety Minister, Ralph Goodall, Tori's father, Rodney, wrote, "I am just asking you to do what's right and return 2 convicted killers back to where they rightfully belong, in maximum security behind bars for life." He said that in fighting this, his main goal was to make sure the 2 people responsible for the murder of his daughter served the sentences they were given. However, Goodale later responded to say that Michael Rafferty is incarcerated in Lakmakaza Institution, which is a secure correctional facility that specialises in dealing with sex offenders. Lakmakaza's buildings are apparently fully surrounded by a guarded double fence that's 3.6 metres high. It's also equipped with advanced security systems, both physical and electronic. Now, in October 2016, it's also worth noting that there was an appeal by Rafferty that had been dismissed. So he basically asked for a new trial. He said that the judge had made errors, which included not warning the jury not to rely on the testimony of McClintock, and also for failing to adequately instruct the jury. For example, they were not given the option to find Rafferty guilty of being an accessory after the fact. So they argued that McClintock lured Tori by herself, told Rafferty to walk away before she killed her with the hammer. Rafferty's lawyer, Paul Calarco, he actually called McClintock unsavoury with a previous history of lying and violence, which is true. Now, the judge, John Laskin, said to Calarco, "You argued an extremely difficult appeal very well, but I simply don't agree with you." Amen to that, judge. Listen, none of us are ever going to know, are we, exactly what happened? We've heard from 2 unreliable witnesses in this case, both McClintock and Rafferty. They're both liars. We can't trust their words. But regardless of the exact details of this murder, what we do know is this: a beautiful little girl lost her life brutally, sadistically at the hands of these 2 monsters. And it is clear that they both belong behind bars before, I don't know, the big GOD decides exactly where they're going to spend eternity. But let's be clear, it's going to be real hot. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. I'll see you again next time. Be safe.